Around 2200 BC, the colossal structures rising on the fertile lands of Mesopotamia became not only symbols of architectural achievements, but also of some of humanity's most important belief systems. These structures represented the people's strengthened ties with the gods, governed the fertility of the land, carried hopes for immortality, and symbolized the beliefs through which mortals communicated with the gods. Ziggurats, as the earthly representations of the gods in Mesopotamia, were symbols that carried both religious and social functions. Shaped by Mesopotamia's irrigation canals, the annual renewing rhythm of agriculture, the transition of nomadic peoples to settled life, and the belief in local gods, these structures seem quite distant for the modern world, but at that time they were considered a very profound cultural organization of humanity. Each ziggurat was more than just a tall structure. Every stone, every layer, every section built, carried meaning, materializing the respect for the gods and the faith of the people. In every detail of the structures, it was possible to find the balance between the power of the gods and the small but significant role of humankind. Ziggurats were not merely temples or places of worship. Every layer, every brick, every detail was a staircase, built to get one step closer to the world of the gods. The people of Mesopotamia hoped to be closer to the world of the gods by building ziggurats. These colossal structures were just a path, a staircase, a bridge to approach the gods. These structures, which allowed the gods to influence the lives of the people, were humanity's effort to connect with the sacred. The construction of a ziggurat was not only a technical achievement, but also an act that shaped the social structure of the Mesopotamian people. Beyond bringing them one step closer to the world of the gods, these structures were also a symbol of social unity. Ziggurats allowed the people to unite around a common goal, with every segment, from the working class to the rulers, contributing. But this was only the beginning. These colossal structures rose not just with physical labor, but with a power of belief that would shape the evolution of human history. The materials used in the construction of ziggurats were quite limited. Construction was possible through workers shaping stones by hand and laying bricks together. Each brick symbolized the power of the gods, and each layer was added to make the gods' presence on earth felt closer. This construction process reflected the deep faith of the people in the gods. The building of ziggurats was not just an architectural achievement, but also a significant turning point in human history. The laborers involved in the construction of ziggurats were seen as offerings to the gods in these massive structures. Ziggurats were a tangible form of worshipping the gods and celebrating their might. These structures were not just a display of faith, but also an expression of society's values. With every brick, every layer, the people of Mesopotamia showed respect to their gods, concretizing the people's bond with the gods. It was evident that ziggurats not only reflected religious beliefs, but also shaped the organizational form and social structure of the Mesopotamian people. These structures were elements that brought together every segment of society and enabled them to unite for a common purpose. Devotion to the gods also strengthened the people's devotion to each other. Ziggurats served not only the gods, but also the people. The construction of ziggurats was an act that united every stratum of society and brought people together. But how much did these colossal structures affect the daily lives of the people? Ziggurats not only strengthened the Mesopotamian people's faith in the gods, but also materialized these beliefs, shaping the spiritual and social structures of the people. In the lands where ziggurats rose, a bridge was built between gods and humans. However, what did drawing so close to the world of the gods mean for the people? The construction of a ziggurat showed how much the people wanted to draw closer to the gods, and at the same time, the societal power underlying these great structures. However, to understand the true purpose behind these structures, one needed to see more than just a temple. Ziggurats rose as structures that reshaped humanity's relationship with the gods, strengthened the social fabric, and defined the people's place in the world. Ziggurats had not only a religious function, but also a social one. So, was the desire to approach the gods the only reason behind the construction of ziggurats? Or were these structures a way for the people to materialize their beliefs and come together to ensure social order? These questions would deepen over time. Ziggurats served as keys to understanding the beliefs, social structure, and culture of the Mesopotamian people. This devotion to the gods shaped every aspect of the people's lives. The construction of ziggurats revealed not only Mesopotamia's architectural power, but also the people's belief system. These colossal structures rose as a tangible representation of communication with the gods. However, the construction of each ziggurat was not merely about materializing the will of the gods on earth, but also a process that strengthened social and cultural ties. Every stratum of the people, from laborers to rulers, united around these structures, and this common effort became a reflection of social order. While building these structures, workers served the gods not only physically, but also spiritually. The layers in the construction of ziggurats were, in fact, a symbol of the people's devotion to the gods. Every brick, every stone, was like the materialized power of the gods' bees, wrought down to earth. With these colossal structures they built, the Mesopotamian people not only drew closer to their gods, but also ensured that every individual in society served this sacred purpose. From the working class to priests, from engineers to rulers, every segment participated in the construction of ziggurats. Even from the lowest classes of the people, contributing to this great structure was seen as both a religious duty and a social responsibility. Ziggurats were a tangible reflection of Mesopotamia's hierarchical structure, as well as the organization of labor. We see each stratum's respect and devotion to the gods paralleling the structural integrity of society. The lowest layers of ziggurats were the foundations built by workers. These layers represented the most basic level of the people. The upper layers were where priests and rulers resided. The highest layer was considered the representation of the gods. While this hierarchical order was materialized in the structure of the ziggurat, each of the social classes had a different role to take one step closer to the gods. However, these structures carried a meaning that transcended the boundaries of social hierarchy. Ziggurats were not just a structural order, but also a combination of the people's social identity and religious beliefs. The internal order of ziggurats was not merely a physical structure, but also a symbol of the people's social functioning. Each layer, on one hand, reflected the internal strata of the people, and on the other hand, materialized their deep devotion to the gods. While building these colossal structures, the people of Mesopotamia were, in fact, also building the order of their own society. Every layer, every stone, every brick reinforced this relationship with the gods. The materials used in the construction of ziggurats further reinforced the sacred nature of these structures. Uris. The bricks used in ziggurat construction were usually made by mixing clay and straw. These materials carried a divine meaning and were a way for the people to show their respect to the gods with the simplest materials. Each layer of the ziggurats, on one hand, rose towards the power of the gods, while on the other hand, it revealed the people's place in society. Each structure became a symbol that the people built with the common effort of all segments of society. Another important aspect of ziggurat construction was the rituals that developed alongside these structures over time. Ziggurats would not only physically represent the power of the gods brought down to earth, but also become centers for offerings to the gods. On the highest layers of the ziggurats, high priests and rulers would offer sacrifices to the gods, striving to follow the right path shown by them. These rituals not only strengthened the people's faith in the gods, but also helped establish order in society. Each layer of the ziggurat symbolized a structure shaped by the beliefs of the people. As one ascended from the lowest layers to the highest, it could be said that each layer represented a journey from the world the people lived in to the world the gods inhabited. Ziggurats were not structures built to connect people's daily lives with the gods, but also symbols of social structures, hierarchies, and human religious beliefs. People built ziggurats not only to show their devotion to their gods, but also to enable these structures to make the power of the gods affect the daily lives of the people. The construction of ziggurats was a process through which the people materialized their beliefs. Every brick, every layer, was an expression of respect for the gods, a symbol of social bonds and order. However, a question arises. Did ziggurats truly bring the people closer to the gods? Were ziggurats not just a temple structure, but also a bridge that reduced the distance between the daily life. Where's of the people and the gods? These questions would deepen over time, and the social interactions involved in the construction of ziggurats would provide more clues about the people's beliefs. Ziggurats were becoming not just physical structures, but also vehicles through which a world of meaning, the relationship between gods and humans, was materialized. The construction of ziggurats not only materialized the devotion of the people in Mesopotamia to the gods, but these colossal structures also laid the foundations of the social and religious structure of ancient societies. Ziggurats symbolized much more than an ordinary structure. They represented the people's beliefs, the role of every individual in society, order and power. Every layer was not just a stone or a brick, but also a concrete expression of the people's respect for the gods, the social structure, and the organization of the state. The ziggurats in Mesopotamia existed as structures symbolizing the connection of the gods with the world, elevating humanity's spiritual journey from earth to the realm of the gods. The highest layers, where the gods resided, made it possible to see the people physically and spiritually closer to the gods. This not only created a space for worship, it also offered every individual, every stratum, every class in society the opportunity to serve the gods. There was a system where everyone played a role within and around these structures. Rulers, priests, laborers, each segment found its place while building these structures. Ziggurats not only materialized beliefs in the gods, but also laid the cornerstones of Mesopotamian society's structure. However, the reason why ziggurats became so large and important was not solely due to social structure. At the same time, ziggurats had become a symbol that shaped the relationship between the people and the gods more deeply. This profound tez, the devotion to the gods influenced every aspect of the people's daily lives. The places where ziggurats were built were a reflection of the people's beliefs and ways of life. Respect for the gods became not just a religious duty, but a social responsibility. Ziggurats symbolized not only the people's efforts to approach the gods, but also their place in society. The presence of workers, labor, and other segments of the people in the lowest layers was a reflection of social inequalities. But these inequalities were part of approaching the world of the gods. Each layer of a ziggurat reflected the people's different levels of devotion to the gods. These structures not only materialized the hierarchical structure of society, but also reinforced the people's faith in the gods and their place in the world. These great structures in Mesopotamia, beyond holding historical significance, still convey the relationship between gods and humans through archaeological findings and remnants today. The abandonment of ziggurats symbolized a great change in Mesopotamia. These structures may have been abandoned and ruined over time, but their remnants still carry the power, devotion, and beliefs of the people who built these colossal structures to the present day. Ziggurats have existed throughout history as important structures that shape the social structures, belief systems, and social dynamics of peoples. Today, looking at the remains of Mesopotamia's ziggurats, we see not just piles of stones, but also a great cultural and religious monument of human history. These structures have remained as buildings that materialize the people's faith in the gods, their social roles, and power relations. Ziggurats have become unique symbols that help us understand how much people desired to be close to the gods in the early periods of human history, and how this quest influenced social order. Today, as we look at the ruins of these ziggurats, we can ask ourselves many questions about the daily lives of the people who built these great structures. Ziggurats symbolize the people's struggles for survival and also their deep faith in the gods. These colossal structures were not just physical entities. They were a symbol where people from every layer of society materialized their devotion and beliefs in the gods and came together. While ziggurats open a window into the world of past peoples, they offer us deep insight into how human history was shaped. The construction of ziggurats shows how much societies valued and materialized their relationship with the world of the gods. Ziggurats were not just structural achievements, but also representations of society's cultural and religious identities. The remnants of ziggurats are not just monuments of the past, but continue to exist as symbols of humanity's effort to reach the world of the gods. Around 2200 BC in Mesopotamia, one way to approach and honor the gods was to build colossal stone structures. These structures, ziggurats, not only pursued a religious purpose, but also materialized the complex structure of society, the distribution of labor, and organizational capability. The construction of ziggurats was a great engineering feat, considering the limited technological capabilities of that era. However, this achievement was possible not only by stacking stones, but also by the perfect coordination of labor, material supply, social organization, and time management. A ziggurat, although designed merely as earthly representatives of the gods, was also a reflection of the collective power, social structure, and engineering capabilities of the people. The workers, stonemasons, engineers, priests, rulers, and other segments of society involved in the construction process were directed towards one goal, to be closer to the gods. Yet beyond this goal, ziggurats were also symbols that shaped too the socio-economic structure, belief systems, and social values of society. The materials used in the construction of ziggurats were quite impressive despite the limited resources of the era. Clay, found in Mesopotamia's nature, was used as the most basic material to build these colossal structures. Clay was preferred both for its malleability and its heat-resistant properties. Each layer of the ziggurats was built with tightly placed bricks, and these bricks were shaped by the workers' hands, dried, and then baked in the sun. The processing of clay and the proper placement of each brick showed that construction was a challenging yet highly skilled job. The use of clay was not the only material involved in ziggurat construction. Mesopotamia's irrigation canals and agricultural techniques were used to overcome challenges such as water supply and transportation during the construction process. Farmers occasionally worked in parallel with these structures being built, assisting the laborers. Additionally, stones and other construction materials were transported over time using larger and more effective transportation techniques. Workers created specific routes for transporting these materials as they carried each brick and built the layers. The construction of ziggurats was not merely a physical process, it was also an activity that shaped the social structure. The construction process was a social organization that reinforced the ruler's power, the priest's religious authority, and the common goal of the people. In this process, every class and every segment assumed a specific role. The vast majority of workers were directly involved in building the ziggurats, while priests and rulers managed and oversaw the project. The contribution of every segment of society ensured that the ziggurat became more than just a structure, transforming into a symbol that united all the people's values and beliefs. At this point, the importance of labor organization in ziggurat construction was immense. The class differences of the workers determined their task distribution in different phases of construction. The lowest classes carried out basic construction work, while stonemasons and engineers focused on the structure's design and the building of higher layers. The higher layers of the ziggurat were not just an architectural achievement, but also a place where the ruling class was considered closer to the gods. Each layer of the ziggurat symbolized the place and contribution of every segment in society. Time management was also of great importance in ziggurat construction. Building the structure required patience and long-term planning. Each layer had to be completed within a specific time frame. The baking of bricks, the processing of stones, and the strengthening of the ziggurat's foundations had to be carefully timed at each stage. This also showed that the people's labor force needed to be organized effectively. This delicate balance between human labor, time management, and material supply made the success in ziggurat construction possible. Ziggurats were not just a great engineering marvel, they were also a symbol of the people's beliefs, labor, and social structure. These colossal structures symbolize the interconnectedness, cooperation, and solidarity of Mesopotamian society. Every layer, every brick, enabled different segments of society to come together and unite towards a common goal. This process not only materialized the people's devotion to the gods, but also revealed the power and will of the people who built these structures. The technology, labor, and organization in ziggurat construction were a reflection of the people's ability to work together and create social order. Each ziggurat was not just a temple or a religious structure, but also symbolized the collective power of the people, the order of society, and social unity. While building these great structures, the people of Mesopotamia not only drew closer to the gods by combining their devotion, their place in society, and their social roles, but also created one of the most important structures in human history. In conclusion, the construction of ziggurats was not just an engineering achievement, but also a process that shaped the roles, beliefs, and social bonds of the Mesopotamian people in society. Ziggurats had become colossal structures, each carrying a separate meaning, but when brought together, they symbolized the power of society and its devotion to the gods. Every brick, every layer, every material was a tool that enabled the people to unite towards a common purpose and draw closer to the gods. The construction of ziggurats was a symbol of the collective effort of the people who built these great structures and left a legacy that materialized the deepest beliefs of Mesopotamian society. The construction of ziggurats was not just about physical structures, but also a process that reinforced the collective identity, religious beliefs, and social order of the people. Although these colossal structures were built for different purposes in every region of Mesopotamia, they all shared the same fundamental aim: to materialize faith in the gods and to establish a connection between the gods and humans. The complex process of ziggurat construction was the product of an organization that united the labor force of every segment of society and where every individual assumed a role. However, this process, over time, created a great labor requirement, becoming a major social activity in which the people participated, both physically and spiritually. In the construction of a ziggurat, labor was not limited to carrying stones. Ziggurats were built using both the physical and mental strength of workers and craftsmen. In the first stage, the Ur, bricks and stones necessary for construction were sourced from local resources. These stones were usually extracted from local quarries, processed by workers, and then transported to the construction site of the ziggurats through large transportation organizations. This required the coordination of many workers. At the same time, considering the size and weight of the stones, the vehicles used for transportation were quite simple. Generally, stones were transported by hand carts, while for large stones, workers transported them along specific routes from settlements. Ziggurats became a reflection of the combined efforts with each stone. Another important factor in ziggurat construction was the organization of labor. In Mesopotamian society, the labor force was highly stratified. The lowest layers of the ziggurat were the areas where workers performed simpler tasks and where basic construction work was carried out. The workers in these layers represented the most fundamental labor force as they laid stones and built foundations. However, engineers and stonemasons working on the upper layers took on a role requiring much more technical skills to ensure the design of the structures, the flatness of the layers, and their stability. The labor force in ziggurat construction was a symbol of the collaboration of different classes of people: workers, priests, engineers, and rulers, each fulfilling their role, contributed to the construction of this colossal structure. The materials used in ziggurat construction were also quite interesting, considering the large scale of the structure. Clay, found in the nature of Mesopotamia, was used as an excellent material for these structures. Clay, in addition to being an easily moldable and durable material, became a very robust building material when dried and baked in the sun. Each brick was shaped with a clay mixture, dried, and then baked. These bricks were used as the main material forming each layer of the ziggurats. Furthermore, the stones involved in ziggurat construction required specific planning and care. Because the durability of each layer depended on the quality of the materials used and how the workers processed the stones. Moreover, time management was also of great importance during the construction of ziggurats. Each layer of the ziggurat was planned as a stage to be completed within a specific period. While the foundations of the structure would be laid more slowly and carefully in the initial stage, the upper layers were built more rapidly. The ziggurat construction process depended not only on the speed of the labor force, but also on environmental factors. Mesopotamia's climate, especially the high temperatures during summer months, caused workers to exert much greater effort during the construction process. Therefore, in ziggurat construction, time management, efficient use of labor, and timely material supply played a critical role. In ziggurat construction, in addition to social labor organization, worker safety was also emphasized. Construction workers toiled under very harsh and dangerous conditions. The weight of bricks and stones to be transported to high levels was great enough to strain the physical endurance of the workers. For this reason, workers involved in ziggurat construction, though often fatigued, were organized to fulfill their duties at every stage of construction. Furthermore, the construction process of these colossal structures also advanced with a spirit of solidarity shaped by the idea of workers serving the gods spiritually and morally. Alongside the organization of labor in ziggurat construction, the tools and techniques used were quite simple. In that era, lacking modern construction machinery and transport vehicles, all transportation and construction were done by the physical strength of the workers. Bricks to be carried to the upper lay, years of ziggurats were transported with wooden levers, and heavy stones were lifted up via ramps. This process required workers to collaborate harmoniously and reinforced social order as part of the labor force. Each ziggurat was not only an architectural achievement, but also a symbol of labor, social structure, and beliefs. The materials used and the labor organization in ziggurat construction were a testament to the great effort the Mesopotamian people made to materialize their devotion to the gods. Each layer, each brick, materialized the people's place in society and their faith in the gods. Ziggurats had become not just construction projects, but also structures with deep historical meaning, symbolizing the collective power of the people. The construction of ziggurats not only materialized the devotion of the Mesopotamian people to the gods, but also these colossal structures became symbols of the deepest beliefs and social bonds in the history of societies. Ziggurats, as structures that materialized the collective power of the people and their respect for the gods, were representations not only of the religious beliefs of the era, but also of its social and cultural structures. Every brick, every layer, was a symbol that enabled different segments of society, from its workers to its rulers, to unite towards a common goal. These colossal structures not only symbolized the people's desire to be closer to the gods, but also revealed the hierarchy of society, the roles of social classes, and how labor was organized. Ziggurats were structures where every individual, from the lowest classes to the highest rulers, showed their bonds with the gods in different ways. While workers toiled in the lower layers, priests and rulers offered sacrifices to the gods in the highest layers and carried the spiritual burden of this great structure. The layers of the ziggurats symbolized a journey, both physically and socially and spiritually. The construction of ziggurats was a process that materialized the spiritual devotions of the people, but it also required the efficient use of labor and resources. Each ziggurat demanded complex labor organization and time management. The materials used in the construction process, the bricks transported, the physical strength of the workers, and engineering knowledge were the elements that made these colossal structures possible. However, this engineering achievement in ziggurat construction was not merely about the efficient use of labor. It also took place in a context shaped by a collective social consciousness. Ziggurats showed that workers not only served the gods, but also that the people, with a collective power, tried to materialize the will of the gods in the world. Another important factor behind the construction of ziggurats was the rituals that developed alongside these structures over time. Ziggurats became centers of worship for the gods, while also shaping the spiritual life of the people. Each layer of the structure symbolized the effort to draw closer to the gods, and the highest layer represented the sacred area where the gods resided. At every stage of construction, the people's respect for the gods was reinforced, and the completion of each layer strengthened the feeling of being closer to the will of the gods. The construction of ziggurats became not just colossal structures made of stone, but also a space where human beliefs, rituals, and cultural values were materialized. As ziggurat construction was completed, These colossal structures shaped not only the religious, but also the cultural and social identity of Mesopotamian society. Ziggurats materialized the people's faith in the gods, while also binding every individual in society with a duty dedicated to the gods. These structures were not just religious symbols, but also an expression of order, labor, and class structures. Ziggurats created a social unity brought together by deep devotion to the gods. Every brick, every layer, reinforced the power of this spiritual bond between gods and humans. The abandonment and destruction of ziggurats was also a reflection of social changes in Mesopotamia. Over time, these colossal structures were abandoned, ruined, and often vanished with time. However, these structures left a very profound legacy. Ziggurats were not just the materialization of beliefs, but also a symbol of a great engineering achievement in human history. These structures were etched into history as concrete expressions of the Mesopotamian people's devotion to the gods, their social hierarchies, and their cultural values. Ziggurats held an important place in the lives of the people, enduring throughout history as structures that shaped their beliefs and their place in society. Today, the remnants of ziggurats have become unique archaeological findings that help us understand the world of the people who built these colossal structures. These remnants are not just piles of stones, but also symbolize the power, solidarity, and beliefs of the people involved in building these great structures. As we look at the remnants of ziggurats, we better understand the social bonds of the people who built these colossal structures, their deep devotion to their gods, and their cultural identity. Ziggurats, as structures where the people's desire to be closer to the gods was materialized, not only carry the traces of the past, but also allow us to understand how societies in the early periods of human history established a connection with the gods, and how this connection shaped the social structure. These structures have remained as a concrete example of an effort dedicated to the gods, and have played an important role throughout history in shaping the beliefs, social orders, and cultural identities of peoples. The remnants of ziggurats still standing today are great symbols that reflect the cultural and religious diversity of the past and inspire the modern world. Today, the impact of ziggurats is evident not only in archaeological sites, but also in modern urban designs. The way ziggurats were built shows how layered structures brought together different segments and functions of society. Modern urban planning and architecture, drawing inspiration from ziggurats, design structures where different social classes and functions coexist. Each layer of the ziggurats had different functions, and these layers symbolized the place of different classes in society. Even today, especially symbolic structures like large government buildings and temples are built as layered structures bearing these characteristics of ziggurats. The construction style of ziggurats has been accepted as a physical expression of social order and popular beliefs, beyond being merely a temple structure. The contemporary impact of ziggurats is not limited to architecture. It also inspires our understanding of religion and belief. Modern religious structures, similar to the layered structure of ziggurats built with the aim of approaching the gods, are built with an effort to be closer to the gods. Ziggurats rose as symbols of the labor the people dedicated to the gods. These structures were a means for the materialization of the people's beliefs. Today's religious structures, drawing inspiration from ziggurats, symbolize the distance between God and humans, while also reflecting the spiritual efforts of the people in building these structures. The impact of ziggurats is not limited to construction engineering and architecture, but also plays a decisive role in the evolution of religious thought and belief systems. The impact of ziggurats did not remain only in the ancient world, but continues to exist in the modern world. These structures continue to be both a representation of the social structure of the past and a source of inspiration for large construction projects in the modern world. The remnants of ziggurats have become not only historical relics for today's archaeologists, but also clues showing how deep a cultural heritage human history possesses. Ziggurats are not just stone structures of the past, but also guide us in understanding the historical bonds, beliefs, and dynamics in the social structures of peoples. The contemporary legacy of ziggurats offers much more than a historical lesson. These structures, as symbols where the desire to approach the gods, the collective effort of the people, and the social structure of society were materialized, still make their impact felt in the modern world. Although ziggurats were once structures built solely to serve the gods, over time they transformed into symbols of great cultural and religious changes in human history. These colossal structures, as a representation of changes in the social structures and beliefs of peoples, still leave an impact even in the modern world. The reasons behind the construction of ziggurats were not merely religious beliefs. These colossal structures were also a reflection of the political, economic, and social structures of Mesopotamian society. While ziggurats materialized the people's deep devotion to the gods, they also rose as symbols of social power relations. Each layer symbolized the people's respect for the gods, but equally, the dominance of the state and priests over the people. The ziggurat construction process was not just an engineering achievement, but also the materialization of a social structure, a hierarchy, and dominance. Each layer of the ziggurats reflected the people's place in society. The lower layers were where workers and peasants resided. These layers symbolized the people's devotion to the gods, but also revealed a situation where workers did not receive compensation for their labor. The highest layers, on the other hand, were places where priests and rulers resided, considered closer to the world of the gods. These structures revealed the social structure from the lowest classes of the people to the highest rulers. Ziggurats not only symbolized devotion to the gods, but also materialized the hierarchy and the chasm between classes in society. Another important aspect of ziggurat construction was the organization of the labor force that built these structures. Ziggurats required great social cooperation. The construction process relied not only on the physical labor of workers, but also on the strong leadership of the ruler and priests, and the strategic intelligence of the administrators. The labor force in Mesopotamia consisted of workers who fulfilled specific functions in each layer. There was an organization where workers, stonemasons, engineers, priests, and rulers divided labor. This division of labor not only ensured the construction of ziggurats, but also defined the role and duty of every individual in society. Although ziggurats were colossal structures contributed to by every segment of the people, each layer was believed to be a place where an upper class was closer to the gods. The materials used in ziggurat construction were also of great importance. Mesopotamia's limited resources required a specific choice of materials to build these colossal structures. Ziggurats were generally built with local materials. Clay was used as the most common material in Mesopotamia. Since clay was a malleable and durable material, it was preferred for making the bricks that formed each layer of the ziggurats. These bricks were dried and baked in the sun, then placed with great skill. The processing of clay made these structures both sturdy and long-lasting. Every brick of the ziggurats was also seen as an offering to the gods. Because the people of Mesopotamia, when using these materials, believed that this clay, which was part of nature and the gods, was a tool that materialized the will of the gods. The architecture of ziggurats was not just a technical achievement, it was also a concrete reflection of a spiritual process. The structures symbolized the people's aim to draw closer to the gods. With the rise of each layer, the people believed they would come one step closer to the gods, laying each brick of this step with their own labor. This belief was reflected in the structure, architecture, and design of the ziggurats. The uppermost layer of the ziggurat was considered a sacred area belonging to the gods. This layer, as an earthly representation of the gods, had become a symbol of the people's deepest respect for the gods. Each layer of the ziggurat also represented a step in the people's own spiritual journeys. However, this architectural beauty and spiritual depth over time transformed into a process that made the lives of the people harder. The size and magnificence of the ziggurats overshadowed the people's desire to create better living conditions for themselves, and far from improving the living conditions of the people who labored more and more every day, it further impoverished them. Although ziggurats were built with the aim of serving the gods, over time these colossal structures had become a symbol opposing the people's demands for justice and equality. Although these structures rose through the labor of the people, every effort expended to be closer to the gods turned into an oppression that made the people's lives even harder. The fact that ziggurat construction, over time, became a tool that made the people's lives harder, led to social unrest. The people had faced more injustice in return for their devotion and labor offered to the gods. Ziggurats, once structures built by the people to be close to the gods, had now become part of a system that exploited the people's labor and made their lives even harder. While these colossal structures reinforced the dominant structure and social order of an era, over time they became an obstacle to the people's demands for freedom and equality. Ziggurats, once built as a symbol of the people's devotion to the gods, ultimately became symbols of the people's struggle for their own rights. The size and magnificence of ziggurats were a reflection of class differences in society. Ziggurats went down in history not only as worship offered to the gods, but also as structures built with the labor and sacrifices of the people. However, over time, these structures transformed into colossal monuments symbolizing the social injustice and inequality faced by the people. The architecture of ziggurats had transcended being a reflection of the people's devotion to the gods and had also become structures symbolizing deep inequalities, oppression, and tyranny in society. As ziggurats were abandoned and destroyed over time, only stones and ruins remained. However, these colossal structures, with the legacy they left behind, continued to be an important cultural and architectural source of inspiration for humanity throughout history. Ziggurats were not only a reflection of the religious and social structure of Mesopotamian civilization, but also cornerstones that inspired fields such as modern engineering, architecture, and urban planning. The legacy of ziggurats not only helps us understand the ancient world, but also continues to show its influence in the modern world. Mesopotamia's ziggurats, with their layered structures and grandeur, were impressive structures that both materialized the differences between social classes and symbolized the people's respect for the gods. These structures were considered earthly representations of the gods, and as the people placed each layer, each brick, they hoped to draw one step closer to the gods. However, over time, ziggurats ceased to be merely an effort to draw closer to the gods and became symbols of the exploitation of the people's labor. Nevertheless, these colossal structures have remained historical legacies and symbols over time, leaving important cultural and religious heritages for the modern world. The contemporary impact of ziggurats is not limited to archaeological excavations. These structures have also gone down in history as buildings that inspired the development of architecture and civil engineering. The architectural features of ziggurats, especially their layered structural systems, have formed a basis for contemporary structures, both aesthetically and functionally. Ziggurats, with their height, symmetry, and the use of each layer for different functions, have become a reference point for modern structures. Even today, the layered structures of ziggurats are similarly applied in high-rise buildings, temples, and important cultural structures. Ziggurats, as structures that materialize the religious and social structure of the people, also show their impact in the construction of modern cities and religious buildings. Modern mosques, churches, and great temples, inspired by the layered structures of ziggurats, materialize the desire to be closer to God and the religious beliefs of the people. The highest layers of ziggurats were considered earthly representations of the gods, and this understanding still influences the design of many religious structures today. These structures, symbolizing the power of the gods, connect with today's religious structures as powerful symbols that materialize the people's beliefs. The impact of ziggurats is not limited to religious structures. These structures also have a great impact on the construction of government buildings. Each layer of the ziggurats symbolized the place of different classes in society, and this layered structure has also been a source of inspiration in the construction of modern government buildings. Even today, especially in state structures and government buildings, designs resembling the layered structure of ziggurats are used. These designs, as symbols of power and authority, were built as structures that define the roles of different social classes and display power. The construction style of ziggurats has transformed into an architectural understanding that symbolizes social structure and power beyond a purely religious purpose. Although only ruins and remnants remained in Mesopotamia after the destruction of ziggurats, These structures still endure as a surviving legacy in the modern world. The remnants of ziggurats have become a way for both archaeologists and historians to delve into the depths of the past, and have also helped modern societies understand their historical roots. The ziggurat construction process offers a great lesson for us to understand how labor, resources, and social structure are interconnected. These structures have not only remained as mere remnants of the past, but have also contributed to our understanding of the historical bonds of modern societies. Today, the remnants of ziggurats still hold great importance as part of a great cultural heritage. The fact that ziggurats in Mesopotamia were not just architectural structures, but also structures symbolizing social structure, the people's beliefs, and the power of the state makes these structures an important cultural symbol in the modern world. Ziggurats today are not just a way to understand the ancient world, but also an important guide for us to understand how social structure, beliefs, and power are shaped. As the destruction and abandonment of ziggurats became a symbol of the people's struggle to make their lives fairer, these structures continue to exert their influence to the present day as colossal monuments symbolizing past social structures, dominance, and the rights of this people. The remnants of ziggurats are not just structures symbolizing the power of the ancient world, but also continue to exist as a great cultural heritage that inspires the modern world and helps us understand social structures and religious beliefs. Ziggurats, beyond being the first great structures to rise in Mesopotamia, left profound impacts on the evolution of human history, making significant contributions both architecturally and in terms of social structures. These colossal temples not only symbolized devotion to the gods, but also offered important clues about the functioning of the state, society, and individuals. The construction of ziggurats was a great achievement in terms of the engineering and labor organization of the era. But these structures were not just technical successes, they were also a reflection of Mesopotamia's cultural, religious, and social dynamics. The contributions of ziggurats to human history might, at first glance, seem limited to civil engineering. However, these colossal structures left a much deeper impact, helping us understand how social and religious structures were shaped. Ziggurats, at the same time, as a way to materialize the people's respect for the gods, also symbolized how people adopted social hierarchy and order, and how they structured power and authority. These structures had become a means for every segment of society to work together and serve a common purpose. Mesopotamia's religious, social, and political structures were integrated during ziggurat construction, and all layers of society were connected through these structures. Ziggurats were a great architectural achievement, but the most important thing they contributed to human history was the ability to materialize people's beliefs and social structures. These colossal structures, while reflecting the people's devotion to the power of the gods, also revealed how social structure, labor, and hierarchy worked. Ziggurats on one hand symbolized the effort to draw closer to the gods, and on the other hand, represented areas where the powerful classes of society believed they were closer to the gods. This layered structure symbolized how the people's beliefs, social order, and power were shaped. One of the greatest contributions of ziggurats to human history is that they showed how large-scale construction projects could be organized and how labor could be utilized efficiently. The labor force involved in ziggurat construction was not limited to workers carrying stones. Engineers, stonemasons, priests, and rulers also worked together to build these colossal structures. The construction of ziggurats was an example of labor organization and efficient resource management. This organization laid the foundations for subsequent large construction projects and urban planning. Ziggurats, as one of the first major construction projects, contributed to human history's advances in architecture and engineering. However, one of the greatest contributions of ziggurats was the materialization of the first great social structures in human history. Ziggurats not only symbolized devotion to the gods, but also revealed social hierarchy, class differences, and how the people's beliefs became structural. Each layer of the ziggurats symbolized the effort of a class in society to draw closer to the gods. These structures materialized both the people's religious beliefs and their social status. Ziggurats are also important symbols showing how the social roles of labor, rulers, and priests were determined. While building these colossal structures, the people of Mesopotamia materialized not only their devotion to the gods, but also social order, power, and authority. The architecture of ziggurats provides very important information about how social structures were organized and managed. Ziggurats allowed every segment of society to work together to build these great structures, and this required a large labor organization. These colossal structures symbolized the people's ability to act together and social solidarity, while also revealing how different classes of society interacted with each other. Each layer of the ziggurats, while symbolizing the effort to draw closer to the gods, also revealed the deep chasms between classes in society. These structures had become important structures that materialized not only the people's religious beliefs, but also social structure and social relations. The contributions of ziggurats to human history had a great impact, not only architecturally, but also in terms of social structures and belief systems. These structures, by bringing together the collective power, social solidarity, and spiritual devotions of the people, demonstrate how societies were built and how powers were organized. The construction of ziggurats was a historical turning point and also shaped our ability to build great structures and social projects in human history. Even today, the legacy left by ziggurats inspires not only our understanding of the past, but also contemporary engineering and architectural projects. Ziggurats were more than just religious structures of ancient Mesopotamia. They also emerged on the stage of history as materialized forms of social structure, power relations, and the spiritual world of the people. These colossal structures, aiming to draw closer to the gods as they rose, over time also offered important insights into how the social structure of the people was shaped. The engineering techniques used in ziggurat construction, social organization, and the collective power of the PCs. Opal left a great legacy not only for that era, but also for subsequent centuries. One of the greatest impacts of ziggurats on society was their first great lessons on how to organize labor and manage resources. The ziggurat construction process allowed thousands of workers and specialists to come together to build a colossal structure. This labor organization served as an important example of how the first large construction projects could be realized. The labor force in Mesopotamian ziggurat construction was not limited to carrying stones. Everyone from stonemasons to engineers, from priests to administrative staff, assumed specific roles in this colossal project. This type of organization became a reference point for large temples, government buildings, and urban planning to be built in later periods. At first glance, ziggurats might seem like religious structures built solely with the desire to be closer to the gods. However, the layered structures of ziggurats and the function of each layer reveal how the social structure of the people was organized. The lowest layers were where the lowest class of society resided. These layers were built with the labor of the people, that is, workers, peasants, and other lower classes. Each layer of the ziggurats symbolized the social hierarchy of society. The uppermost layers were where priests and rulers resided, considered earthly representations of the gods. Each layer was a symbol of the people's effort to draw closer to the gods, but at the same time, it also materialized the chasm between social classes. These structures had a social order that defined the role of every individual. Everyone involved in ziggurat construction had a role. Priests symbolizing the will of the gods on earth, engineers materializing the people's beliefs, administrators organizing the labor force, and workers toiling for the temple. This structure provided an important guide on how to organize the labor force of society. How so? Skill classes would have different functions, and how devotion to the gods would be materialized. This organization continued to be applied in similar ways in other great civilizations in later years. The architecture of ziggurats had become a tool that reinforced both social structure and social relations. These colossal structures were not just temples dedicated to the gods, they were also a reflection of the structure of society. Each layer of the ziggurats was a reflection of the different classes in society and the devotion of every individual to the gods. While the lower classes worked in an effort to serve the will of the gods, the upper classes resided in the highest layers, symbolizing the privilege of being closer to the gods. These structures had become symbols distinguishing the lower and upper classes of society. As the people built each layer to be closer to the gods, they also began to realize that these structures were becoming part of a system that further debased and exploited them. Another important element that ziggurats contributed to social structure was that the people who built these colossal structures served a common purpose. Every layer, every brick, every stone symbolized the people's respect for the gods. However, this respect over time turned into symbols of social injustices and inequalities. The people working in ziggurat construction, instead of improving their own lives, continuously expended more labor to materialize the goal of being closer to the gods, but their efforts went unrewarded. Although ziggurats, as structures materializing these devotions to the gods, appeared to unite the people, over time they led to social unrest. The meaning carried by each layer of the ziggurat symbolized the roles of different segments of society within the social order. These structures were not just religious expressions, but also indicators of the people's social structure and their place in society. Being closer to the gods was not just a religious goal, but also a process where class differences in society deepened. While ziggurats were a symbol of a noble purpose to which the people dedicated their lives, they were also a tangible indicator of social injustice and inequality. The strengthening of this structure by ziggurats in society, while materializing the people's devotion to the gods, also became a tool that reinforced the social structure and increased the power of the wealthy classes. Ziggurats continued to exist as structures that enabled the people to act together, but also caused social classes to become even more separated from each other. This social structure was shaped by the influence of ziggurats, because while the people expended great efforts for these colossal structures dedicated to the gods, every individual in society also began to understand their place and role. Ziggurats, as part of the cultural and religious heritage of ancient Mesopotamian civilizations, are etched into the depths of human history. These colossal structures, beyond the engineering and construction capabilities of that era, symbolized important social, cultural, and religious changes in human history. While ziggurats, on one hand, shaped the spiritual world of the people as structures materializing devotion to the gods, on the other hand, they had become concrete structures that defined the social structure and reinforced the place and power of social classes. However, these structures not only reinforced the power of the dominant rulers of the era, but also became symbols of the first great social movements, rebellions, and efforts to resist social inequality in human history. One of the greatest elements that ziggurats contributed to human history was their ability to materialize the religious beliefs of societies. These colossal structures became a symbol that brought together not only the desire to be closer to the gods, but also the collective power of the people. The first great civilizations in Mesopotamia, while materializing respect for the gods, also reflected the functioning of society through these structures. Ziggurats were centers where social hierarchy and religious beliefs merged, where people were connected to each other, and where power relations were symbolized. These structures not only symbolized social order, but also went down in history as powerful structures that reinforced the social and religious bonds of the people. Another important contribution is that ziggurats, as one of the first examples of large-scale construction projects, contributed to the development of modern engineering and construction techniques. The construction of ziggurats required a large organization of labor. Thousands of workers, engineers, stonemasons, and administrators came together to build these colossal structures. This organization was an important example of how society could efficiently use its labor force, how resources could be supplied, and how a large construction project should be planned. Each layer of the ziggurats, in addition to being an architectural achievement, symbolized how different segments of society could work together. This type of large-scale organization became a fundamental reference point for the construction of pyramids, temples, and large government buildings in subsequent centuries. One of the contributions of ziggurats to human history, beyond architecture and construction, was the lessons they provided on how societies were organized. Ziggurats were built as structures that materialized the spiritual values of the people, but they were also a symbol of social inequality and power structures. Each layer of the ziggurats was a concrete reflection of the will of the people and rulers, and even the gods. The class differences of the workers involved in ziggurat construction removed these structures from being merely religious buildings, constructed with the aim of being closer to the gods, and also turned them into symbols that reinforced the social structure and materialized the deep chasm between classes of the people. The lowest layers were where workers and peasants resided, while the highest layers were where priests and rulers resided. These structures symbolized not only the people's devotion to the gods, but also their place in the social structure. The legacy of ziggurats not only remained part of ancient Mesopotamian civilization, but also continued to influence cultures, architecture, and social structures worldwide. In modern urban planning, in the construction of government buildings and temples, the layered structures and elevated forms of ziggurats still serve as inspiration. These structures offer us important clues on how social classes, power dynamics, and sacred beliefs are intertwined, and how these elements were built. The impact of ziggurats was not limited to religious structures. The legacy of ziggurats is still felt in the construction of cities, government buildings, temples, and other large structures. This legacy also led to significant changes in society's understanding of religion, belief, power, and governance. Ziggurats, as symbols of social order, deeply influenced human history as structures that brought together the power of the people and materialized their devotion to the gods. These structures symbolize the role played by the people in shaping their own destiny and establishing the structure of society. The legacy of ziggurats contributed to the understanding of both past and present engineering and social organization, and has been influential throughout history as important structures that materialized cultural and religious values. In conclusion, ziggurats were more than just the religious structures of ancient Mesopotamia. These structures, materializing the beliefs, power structures, and social hierarchies of societies, and at the same time being pioneers of human history's first great construction projects, continue to inspire the modern world. Although ziggurats symbolize devotion to the gods, they have also left a powerful legacy that reinforced social structures, enabled people to come together, and showed how belief systems were shaped. This legacy allows us to understand human history better day by day.